This log was never supposed to become anything. It had been waiting in my firewood storage, waiting to be burned. But before that happened, I wanted to see if there was anything worth saving inside. The problem was, from the outside, it looked like every other piece in the pile. Rough bark, a few cracks, nothing that really suggested there was something special inside. But that's exactly why I chose it. If I could turn this into something beautiful, the transformation would even be better. So, instead of cutting away all the rough outside, I decided to keep part of it and turn it into a natural edge bowl. That way, even when the bowl was finished, you would still be able to see where it came from. Before I could start turning, I had to make this irregular log safe enough to put on the lathe. I cut the log in half and exposed some fresh wood for the first time. And immediately, that changed things. Because underneath that rough exterior, the grain looked already way better than I expected. But there was still one problem. The blank was nowhere near round. That meant I couldn't just start shaping the bowl. First, I had to slowly remove the highest points until the piece came balanced enough to work with. So I started with very light cuts. At first, the tool was barely touching the wood, but with every pass, more of the log disappeared and the shape underneath became clearer. Eventually, I started to see the outline of the bowl. But at this point, I only had the finished outside. The center was still completely solid. So I turned the piece around, mounted it from the other side, and started hollowing it out. And this was the moment the project became much less forgiving. I also had to make the wall thickness work with the shape I'd already made on the outside. If I'd stopped too early, the bowl would feel heavy. But if I removed too much material, one bad cut could go straight through the inside. So the deeper I went, the smaller my cuts became. I kept stopping the lathe to check the thickness and adjust the shape from the inside. But eventually, I reached the point where taking off more wood wasn't going to make the bowl better. It was just going to make the risk bigger. So I stopped. The shape was finished, but it still didn't look like anything like the bowl I had pictured at the beginning. There were some tool marks, and the grain that looked so promising earlier had almost disappeared again. So the next step was sanding. I worked through the surface until all those tool marks were gone and it finally felt smooth. But even after all of that, the wood still looked fairly ordinary, which meant there was one last chance for this piece to prove it had been worth saving: the finish. As soon as the oil started touching the wood, everything I had been looking for started to appear. The color became deeper, the grain suddenly had contrast, and the natural edge that made the turning more difficult was now the part that gave the bowl the most of its character. A few hours earlier, this was sitting in a pile waiting to be burned. But because I put it out before that happened, all of this was still hiding inside. And that's what I like about working with pieces of wood like this. You don't really know what you're making when you start. You have an idea, and eventually you end up with something you could have planned perfectly from the beginning. This log was supposed to become firewood, but I think this was a much better ending.